As I've said before, sometimes in the course of putting together a series you will find that there are some little pieces of the story that might not fit into the main narrative of what you're telling. However, while sometimes those ideas are alternative universes or what-ifs, sometimes you might find canonical details that you feel need to be told but can't fit them cleanly into the path your narrative is taking. That's sort of what the video I'm talking about here is. It's not part of the main series of Little Red Transfer videos, but it's instead a kind of mini-series that Aquanta is working on. And, as always, I'm eager for more details about this world and the mystery of what happened to people like Ivan, and what secrets are being hidden within the company of Illusion Plus Entertainment. This is of course just the first episode of this mini-series, so we'll be doing a bit of a skim, and covering what I see as the interesting details, what they can tell us, and trying to put them into context with what's come previously. I'm also going to take the chance to cover another part of Little Red Transfer that I've so far barely touched upon, the Little Red Transfer team, and all the extra information they've been leaking out because there's quite a bit. I won't be discussing Don't You Call Home quite yet though. I think I need a bit more time to think on that one, and this script is already long enough. Also, before we start, I can't fail to mention that this is part of a big project between creators of the VHS horror known as Broadside Film Fest. If you find yourself enjoying this video, it's probably worth your while to go check out other videos that are part of this project too. Support the creators. Also, I'm well aware that this video came out 6 months ago. Unfortunately, I started writing the script and then I had to take my break, but I'm covering it now, so hopefully it's all good. And as always, please make sure you watch the video first if you don't want to be spoiled. Be warned that this is VHS horror, even if it's of a slightly different variety. While there's nothing graphic, there are discussions of death, disappearances, and some shocking scenes to do with extreme weather conditions. So yeah, be aware as always, and avoid the video and this one if you think you might have some trouble dealing with it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Little Red Transfer
Énouement.
Yeah, that. The video itself starts with a new logo for AquantaFilms before we carry on into the video proper. The words Bathhouse Row Antiques, Hot Springs, Arkansas, 2017, 6:18 appear on screen. We get a few shots from a handheld camcorder of what appears to be the clock we saw back in Count Your Years, as well as the person in shadow who seems to be either against something or in front of / behind something. They almost look as if they are lying down, and we see arms moving and a hand raising before we see the clock again and see the title for the video of Little Red Transfer Énouement. Subtitles begin to appear on the screen under the visuals, the person writing telling us about how they came to be involved in the Little Red Transfer team, which is something I'll talk about more later. This person mentions how they started by writing an article in 2002 on an old Little Reds game, Acre Ridge. This immediately tells us who this narration belongs to. Oscar Taylor, whose article on this game we saw as part of the hidden content for Vessel of Notion, as well as the related blog outpost of the article that gave us Oscar's name as the author in the first place. After this, Oscar found himself drawn down into the rabbit hole of tracking down old pieces of Little Red and Illusion Plus merchandise, something he describes as becoming a product of its reality, as he yearned for answers to the questions the game had made him pose. As he tells us that he's been going out of his way to track down the physical items, we see another game on screen. A little red character who again we saw in some of Vessel of Notion's hidden media, this time as part of the password video, as well as said character being Oscar's icon on the Blogow page. We see the character strike a victory pose, then the screen slides sideways to show the character in a 3D environment very reminiscent of PlayStation and N64 games of the late 90s or early 2000s. Oscar then tells us about how in 2017 he received an email from a source in Hot Springs, Arkansas who was aware of his search. Said email let him know of a local antique store receiving a collection of new stock, including a clock who resembled the clock from the Illusion Plus Entertainment New Year special, Count Your Years. The email mentions that only clips had been recovered of that cartoon, but hopes that having something that resembled the clock would make up for it. It's here that we learn the clock has an actual name, Coil the Clock. We also see a part of Count Your Years, the part where Coil asks if Lox is ready for him to assist the Golden Bear, but also hear him mention being due the trigger. As the footage continues with more subtitling underneath detailing how Oscar flew from his house in Texas to Arkansas, we see video from inside a plane showing the wing and he mentions being just in time to purchase the clock. He then tried to get the clock to work, but found that nothing he did seemed to make any difference to it. He even tried to contact the antique store to see if they could give him any information, but was told that the clock was most probably water damaged. Interestingly, the subtitles tell us that Oscar asked for information on the items, which suggests to me that there might have been more than one Illusion Plus related item he had acquired from this store at this time. After a month, he opened it up to get to the inner workings, only to find that the inside of the clock was completely gutted of all its inner workings, but we can see Coil's clock eyes going back and forth and hear it ticking. We can also see the clock hand slowly moving around the clock face as the clip continues, despite the subtitles and Oscar telling us that there were no mechanics inside. Instead, Oscar found a stack of computer disks, all bearing the words Illusion Plus Entertainment Preservative Project. Oscar tells us that what he found on the disc was what he wanted to show off, transfers of the footage from two different teams of workers, one already seemingly on location and the other travelling to a location by car. The first video for the team on site was one of the company mandatory progress report videos that Illusion Plus required of the team to stop them from potentially stealing any of the things they were sent to recover, as well as to map out an environment they were inside of. However, it also seems that a conversation between two employees was recorded without their knowledge on top of this. We see what appears to be an opening jingle for the Preservative Project videos, and see a screen that has a photo of a number of people, who we can guess are probably the employees on site for this project. This screen tells us that this footage and recovery took place on February 5th, 2008, and lists the location as being the Helix warehouse, and has the word audio misspelled as audio. We also see two of the employee photos pop up with the names, the woman being Alex Burrow, and the man Tony Freeman. We hear Alex talking about someone paying a lot even after his failure, to which Tony, seemingly, responds with, "You're talking about Happy Valley, right?" The second video was dashcam footage of the team on the way to what Oscar says is another location. Oscar tells us that it consists of 3 adults discussing their experiences working on the project. During this part we also briefly see what appears to be a computer window with options for accessing the different parts of certain storage media, including Blu-ray and audio CDs. As part of this window we see an image of Coil as he appeared during Count Your Years, which could suggest that the part of that cartoon we've already seen could have been on the disc that Oscar found. It could have been the original source of the upload we've already seen, but that's unclear and actually unlikely. With the Preservative Team logo over it though, it could also suggest that the reason the discs were hidden in this hollowed out clock was simply because this clock was one of the items the Preservative Team took during the documented projects on the discs. After this, Oscar is quiet, and after a period of blackness we're suddenly shown some visuals of what appears to be an on-street advert for a Little Red's venture on the left, alongside a visual on the right of cartoony versions of Little Red, Gally and Lox. During this short section though, the visuals on the left side change along with the narration. That narration is a voiceover which seems to be an advert associated with the Little Red's location in the sign, a new venture we've not yet seen in the videos, Little Red's World of Fathom. The advert talks about how buying Little Red's custard bowl could give you the chance to win a free reading from Hoko's Book of Fathom, and we see an old-fashioned fortune teller booth appear on the screen with the same title slapped on top of it. Or alternatively, you could put a quarter into the machine to get a reading, but the audio begins to slow and stops altogether. Also seen during this is a digital camera showing the same Little Red from the advert, with the background of what looks to be a theme park behind him. Specifically, we can see the peak of a roller coaster, a set of stands in front of that, and a flag upon a tall pole. Based on the voiceover asking us to put a quarter in the slot below, we can also take a guess that this was probably the audio that played from the Hoko machine when it wasn't in use, in an attempt to grab the attention of passing customers. We then hear a male voice saying, "This is Hoko," and asking someone called Alex if they're close to your vision. The scene then changes to a handheld camera of an inside environment being lit by what appears to be a handheld light, and the screen with the set of employee faces we saw a little earlier appears over it with the same location and the misspelled audio as the conversation continues, and we see the dialogue being subtitled on screen for us, with the names of the people speaking. In the background we hear rain pouring around them, sounding as if it's outside the building the footage is being shot in. Alex Burrow responds that Hoko is nice in a distracted way, and the male voice, Tony, asks Alex what's wrong. Alex at first simply asks what? But Tony notes that he's seen how miserable she looks, everyone has, and asks again what's wrong, adding quietly, "You can tell me," in a reassuring voice which goes unsubtitled. Alex pauses for a few seconds and confesses that the arguments between her father and Austin have been getting worse. Austin wants to take over the company after Alex's father passes, but the father refuses to pass even though he's getting weaker and refuses to stay in the hospital. Tony sympathetically tells Alex that he's sorry about her father, but says that he now understands why Alex has been taking Mr. Burrow's place on things. Alex just scoffs and calls it more like job, but the footage starts to flicker and cuts off into black. The footage then flickers back with a similar overlaid graphic of the Preservative Project's group, but the footage behind it is much brighter and the noise sounds a lot more like a loud party is happening around the camera. By the looks of it, it almost seems like the footage behind the graphic is not one of a handheld camera though, but almost looks as if a list of images is being scrolled through. The graphic is also a bit smaller and the location has also changed to say employee phone dock. And at a guess, this is the conversation between two employees that was recorded on top of the footage. We hear a voice telling someone to wait while they step outside, and then the sound around him gets quieter and eventually becomes that of a quiet night. We begin to see subtitling, but the voice speaking is only identified as, unidentifiable. They ask the person on the other side if everyone made it to Nashville, and seems to get an affirmative response because he says, yeah, okay, cool. Then goes on to mention that he had a question for the other person. He asks how long it'll be before they can stop doing these underground parties, noting that the entire park is full of bachelors. He asks if Alex is really okay with them, because for Illusion Plus's first fully owned location, they seem to be running it into the ground as if it's nothing. The footage then flickers and goes black again. We then rejoin Alex and Tony at the point where Alex was cut off and hear her describe what she's currently doing, filling in for her father as job babysitting until the real replacement comes, and she doesn't think it's going to be Austin by the looks of things. Tony asks who then, because there doesn't seem to be a huge selection of people who could take over, and despite saying he doesn't want to stress her out further, tells Alex that Illusion Plus is dying. Alex actually acknowledges this, but then lowers her voice as she confidentially tells Tony that she's seen someone named Haynes poking around the office a few weeks ago, maybe even before that. She also states that she wouldn't be surprised if this all leads to him. Tony sounds surprised, asking if Haynes isn't the one who owns everything here. It's here that we hear the two snippets of conversation between them that we saw in the video's introduction by Oscar, but with full sentences and context now. Alex says that yes, he's dropped a lot of money on this project, and with his own failure of an entertainment brand, that Haynes had no choice but to buy Illusion Plus to be in the entertainment industry. Tony then asks if she's talking about Happy Valley, the spelling different from how we previously saw the name of this rival entertainment brand spelt. The subtitles go on to describe it as awful, but the footage once again begins to stutter and flicker and goes black. However, after a few seconds it comes back and Tony continues on with what he was saying. He then goes on to list how this other brand failed. Failed TV shows, Harry's Frozen Emporium which got shut down after multiple band-aids were found in the ball pit, and ugly mascots that scared children, before adding, the list goes on, again unsubtitled. Alex then asks what the mascot was even supposed to be. Tony calls it Roadkill and notes that he thinks it's supposed to be a hog or something, but that it looks like something that's no longer alive, and they both laugh. The footage then switches immediately back to the conversation in the employee phone dock, where the unidentified person is still asking if Alex gave the okay, even though the subtitles ask if Alex have the okay. The person on the other side seems to tell them something that surprises them though, and they say they'll check something. After checking, they note they thought it would be nicer out there, and that they hope everyone is okay. They also say that they can come after the party, then ask the person on the other side, Arthur, where they are. It then switches instantly back again to Alex and Tony. The two seem to be walking down a corridor based on the footage behind the graphic, and they are quiet for a moment as the sound of the rain pounds around them and we hear thunder sounds telling us that the rain outside is probably a big storm. Alex starts complaining about someone that made it seem like we've skipped something between now and the last time we were with the two. She asks what his deal is, asking Tony if he sees this shit and calling them obsessed with her, and we also hear Tony mutter "stalker" underneath her angry words. The footage again flickers out, but this time the graphic on top seems to glow as we're switched back to the phone call. The unidentified voice tells the person on the other side to just move the box back into the warehouse, and then is told something that causes him to ask, "You see her in there?" And he responded to it in a way that made him go, "Oh, okay," before the footage flickers out again and gives us a few more seconds of dark screen with white noise silence. We're then back with Alex and Tony as they continue to walk through the premises they're in, and Alex mutters about how that put her in a bad mood. She then decides to return the conversation back to Hoko and asks if he can do anything else besides read odd stories as a stole from Fortune Town, to which Tony responds, "Oh, he can dance," before the footage once again flickers out. We then finally begin to see clips from the second video, the dashcam footage taken from a car being driven down a road, and hear a subtitled conversation between the aforementioned three adults, Cooper Leslie, Alan Koskin, and Alice Hazels. The radio is tuned to a station, playing some music, and the weather outside is rainy but nothing more than just a heavy downpour. We hear Cooper first complaining to Alan about the preservative project and the fact that they're having to go out there in this weather. Alan only says that they need to get to the location before the weather gets too bad, noting that it would have been worse weather if they'd been travelling later. Cooper then complains that they've gotten up so early to go to the location, calling it a wild inconvenience when Alan tells him to stop complaining so much. Alan tells them off for expecting work to be easy, and sarcastically notes that they haven't brought anything to protect his shoes, to which Cooper protests that his shoes are really nice and probably cost more than the car they're currently driving there in. The footage then flickers out to black. After a few seconds of white noise silence, we hear a snippet of Alex and Tony laughing without any footage before it stops again, going back to white noise. We then have the first video footage from Alex and Tony's location flicker back in and hear them laughing again before it flickers some more. It then stops and we join the two of them in their conversation as Tony asks Alex if there's anything she needs or he can do to make her feel better before we lose them again. Back to the second video, and we hear Alex for the first time and see that outside the vehicle the weather has gotten a bit worse around them, and as it rolls there are signs that this downpour has turned into a decent storm. Alex talks about liking the car and how it is before reaching for something, and Cooper asks her what she's doing. Alice is reaching for something on the dashboard, something she doesn't recognise, and Alan tells them that it's a dashcam that the company is having them record to make sure they won't steal anything. Alice asks why it's already recording as they haven't reached the location yet, and Alan says it's because they want to make sure the group isn't going to damage their car or anything, and calls the company very strict because of it. The footage then flickers out. Back to Alex and Tony, and we hear Alex giving someone orders. It seems before we rejoin them that someone was complaining to her because she tells them to just do their job and put this guy in the truck behind the claw machines. She also mentions that she needs to have some plans ready to hand in soon. Around them we can hear the sounds of heavy water, suggesting that the rain outside of where they are has also gotten heavier. The footage behind the graphics shows that the person holding the camera is now in the stairwell of a building. We're then back with the team in the car, and Alice asks if they can stop for food, calling Alan a babe as she does so. Alan agrees, if a little reluctantly, suggesting that he really wants to get to the location before the weather gets too bad, but recognises that Alice is right about them eating something before they get there. Outside though, the storm is really beginning to pick up in ferocity, making his reluctance understandable. As they turn and drive along in silence, the radio suddenly stops broadcasting the song it had been playing, falling silent, and then the sounds of an emergency alert signal begin to sound in the car. The footage begins to flicker out, but we can hear Alan beginning to ask, "Y'all," and we can probably guess that he was about to ask if the other two were hearing the same thing he was. We see the first video section flicker briefly with the location of Alex and Tony's footage before it changes to that of the phone doc's call. The unidentified voice speaks to the person on the other side of the line, asking where the other guy is, how he got to Nashville, and suggesting that he tried to get home because it sounds really bad over there. The footage then flickers again, and we're back in the stairwell again and hear a brief snippet of Alex talking, saying that they're ready, but the words aren't subtitles and the footage again flickers out. We're then back with the car team, and outside the road ahead is now pretty much hidden by the amount of rain and wind that has come with the storm, but the radio has begun broadcasting music again. We've skipped ahead slightly because Alan is saying that the others really waited a long time to tell him about something, although he doesn't sound upset at this. He then asks Cooper to check the email they'd received because he'd forgotten what it was they had come looking for. Cooper does so, hesitating as he reads, but Alice pipes up that they're looking for the clock. Coil the clock. The footage flickers and drops for a second in between Alice saying they're looking for the clock and Cooper stating the clock's name. Alan asks if that's really his name, and Cooper says that Coil was honestly his favourite character. Alan then claims to have never heard of Coil, which gets an incredulous response from Alice. The footage then drops out again. We come back to the car team, with the picture stuttering and fading in and out. We hear a loud blare of what seems to be some sort of siren and hear Alan go, "Oh my god," before it cuts out again. The footage comes back, visuals still stuttering but now shaking slightly too. The siren is still blaring and we hear Cooper telling Alan to pull over before we lose the footage again. We hear a loud sound which almost sounds like that of a large vehicle, then are back in the phone dock as the unidentified voice asks Arthur if he's okay as the visuals flicker and shake slightly. Then we're back with the car team and hear Alan cursing as the visuals continue to shake and hear the loud noise again, footage dropping in and out as we hear Alice's voice a little distance away telling Alan that they need to go, go, go. The footage is dark again as we hear the loud sound, then back to the team as Alan tells Alice something that's a bit harder to make out, but it seems like there's something in front of them, and I also make out the word driving. The footage flickers in and out a few more times, and the loud sound begins to overlap over any other in the car footage until it gets extremely loud and the footage flips over, almost as if the vehicle the dashcam was mounted in was hit by something, flipping it over. Everything then returns to silence, and we hear Oscar speak again, his words appearing on screen. He states his name, that he is a member of the Little Red's transfer team, and that this was his discovery. We then see the credits with the video with the voice actors, and the video ends with a plea to anyone who had Little Red's related media to contact the team on an email.